All right, guys, what is up? Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark. Another episode of GC Live, bi-week episode, part 2. No Gamecocks football this week, but still wanted to hop on and catch up with you guys and talk a little bit of offensive coordinator, maybe get into the final 3 weeks of the season, potentially, depending on how much time we have. But first, going to tell you about some of our great sponsors. Our guy, Clint Hammond, our presenting sponsor here on the show, Clint Hammond, CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com. 803-422-6797. NMLS number 71597. Like we always tell you, if you're in the market for a home, even if you're not, maybe one day you will be, just give Clint an opportunity to earn your business. He was fantastic for me and my wife when we bought this very house that I'm sitting in right now. He'll be the exact same for you. Been in the mortgage game for a long time. Knows all the ins, the outs, the tricks, just the things you need to know. And he'll help you through just every single step of that process that can be, if it's your first time, frankly, pretty daunting. So give Clint a shout, 803-422-6797. Tell him that you heard about him here on GC Live.
Let's also tell you about our folks over at Ferry Chevrolet, F-A-I-R-E-Y, ferrychevrolet.com, or give them a call, 803-937-4531. If you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, specifically, Wes, a Chevy, go check out our friends over at Ferry Chevrolet. Joseph Ferry over there is a fourth-generation dealer for a car dealership that began in the state of South Carolina, got into business all the way back in 1926 in St. Matthews. So obviously doing something right. They're still around, still doing well, still helping serve the community, hooking up people with awesome new and used vehicles with great service, honesty, integrity, and a handshake. That's how they still operate over at Ferry Chevrolet. Conveniently located now in Orangeburg. As y'all know, that's super convenient to Columbia and Charleston. Well worth your visit over there, but you can also, again, check them out online, ferrychevrolet.com.
Chris, also want to welcome our newest sponsor to the show, Blanchard Cat.
Nice.
Just kidding. We're not going to go into that today. Talk a little Gamecock football.
We could probably just say, if they're listening, we'll give them a discount from what they paid Carolina and Clemson. You know,
there you go. We can make that happen.
We'll make it happen. You know, we'll just take whatever is in Williams-Brice and Memorial Stadium and then add it together and then come up with what they pay per person per game. And then we'll slice that down to our audience and they can pay that. We'll have them on.
Now we can't place it on the field, right? Like we can't like this. Our version of the field is right there above my head. Clint has that as long as Clint wants that spot.
It's locked. Yeah.
He will have it forever. So
that's right.
Shout out to Clint, our guy, ClintHammond.com. Again, Chris, Beamer made what you had reported was going to happen. Mike Fury, the play caller. I want to get into that just a little bit, just briefly. But then I really want to go into maybe a few names. Not that we've heard. It's way too early for that. But just kind of qualities we would like to see in an offense coordinator at South Carolina. But Beamer did make it official on Wednesday on the SEC teleconference that Fury will be South Carolina's primary play caller. Kind of interesting. He made a point. He didn't say offensive coordinator. He didn't really say there's an official OC. It's going to kind of be a team effort in terms of game plan. Now, it typically is a little bit of a team effort anyway. It's just a matter of that OC kind of has not just final say on game day, but final say in those meetings leading up to a game. So I think interesting opportunity here for Fury. You only have 3 games left. There's only so much you can do in that short period of time. You're not gonna install a new playbook. I don't even know if you're going to install many new plays, Chris. Like the playbook is fairly extensive itself. It's just more a matter of, I would say, game day play calling. I would say it's more of a matter of getting a feel for the game, more of a matter of what do you pick out for that particular week going into that game. What is our focus on this week to get the guys ready so that when I do call play A, play B, play C, that it is executed at a high level?
Yeah, I think execution's the big thing to look for, right? I mean, we have seen You know what? I shouldn't even say that's the big thing because we've seen all of this in spots, right? There have certainly been too many instances this year where we're going back and saying, okay, we have the benefit of hindsight. If a play works, ultimately it's a good call. You might say that was risky. You know, if you line up and run a jet sweep on 4th and 1 instead of just being able to run it right up the middle, you might say that's a risky call. Could have lost yard. If it works, ultimately you say, okay, that was a good call. It worked. If it doesn't work, it was a bad call. If you kind of really want to simplify it, we do have the benefit of hindsight when we're watching, of course, based on the result. But there have been a lot of instances that we've gone back and looked at, Wes, and you go, 3rd and short, you're passing the football, which is fine, makes sense because now Lenore Sellers has the ability to see something he likes in the passing game or take off and run. But what you have often seen is, man, there's a lot of routes downfield, right? Like that's been a big talking point this year. But we've also seen just execution. We have seen, to give proper credit, we saw it against Ole Miss in the last game Carolina played. There's a wide open guy. Carolina misses it, right? So everybody has to take ownership in this, which Shane Beamer has talked about. But for the offensive staff, Mike Furry, Sean Elliott, who I imagine Carolina is going to lean on even more in the run game, Marquell Blackwell, who has some experience putting together offensive game plans. What can those guys do to help Carolina with some of the execution problems, right? We have seen over time the offensive line has executed better in terms of the procedural stuff. So it does appear that it's possible to get better on certain execution fronts. At some point, you got to be able to line up, and if Dre Jacobs runs a deep over route and it's wide open, if you're Sellers, yes, you got to hit him. But what can you do to build Sellers' confidence? Can you give him easier throws throughout the game? Can you get him running a little bit? When it is a 3rd down big situation, can you draw up something that doesn't rely on him having to sit back there and the offensive line protect for a really long time and all these different parts work to where you're just able to get the ball out, go out, play ball, execute. All those pieces have to work together. This is a Carolina offense that if there's one thing they've done well, or not, maybe not well, but pretty well at times this season, it has been they've been explosive, right? How can you continue to harness that while just executing a little bit better on a down-to-down basis? And that's the challenge, of course, for the staff, and they're going to have to do it coming up against one of the nation's best teams on the road in the very next game.
Yeah, and I do think if I'm them, like there were some things they've done the last few weeks, and I would say to varying degrees of success that have looked different than what they were doing early in the season. In some cases, it's more of a matter of, well, you did this earlier in the year, but you're kind of doubling down on it a little bit. You're kind of focusing in on it a little bit more. The motions into the backfield, the kind of 2-back looks where you're bringing Matt Fuller across and kind of that jet sweep motion. Some of what, is not like traditional triple option, but is the modern version that you see spread teams do, where there's a handoff like zone read option, and then I can keep it as the quarterback or pitch it out option out of a lot of times you kind of have that orbit motion where you're involving the slot guy in a play. And, we have seen it in, again, varying degrees of successes so far. There's a lot of talk, hey, don't run the ball up the middle so much. And then what happens on a 4th and short? You try to run outside, and, it just gets – the play was completely blown up. And you inevitably get some, hey, well, that was a terrible call too. So I do think it goes well beyond like, you run the ball up the middle too much. You need to run it on the edges. Well, then when you run it on the edges, hey, you got to block out there too. So I think a lot of it is about execution, but execution comes from a number of different things. Sometimes it's talent. Sometimes it's how often have you repped these particular plays or these particular concepts. Some of the stuff we've seen the last 3 weeks, Chris, I would say particularly in the run game, you can tell there's a little bit more of a Sean Elliott impact or influence, I should say.
Yep.
We were hearing they were doing those things quite a bit in the spring, and then you get into the games this fall, and it just didn't feel like some of that stuff was called quite as much. So could you use this extra week to maybe kind of double down on just the execution of some of those things you've tried to implement a little bit more of the last couple of weeks? Will Furry try to find some different ways to get these wide receivers involved, get the ball out quickly, get the ball in their hands, and let them go make plays? I really liked what we saw from Brian Rowe on Saturday. Like, I think watch Brian Rowe catch the football. There's a couple of occasions he plucks the ball out of the air. It's not body catching. It's a hands catch. It's a fluid motion. You got to see a little bit of just the reason why they were so high on him dating back to the bowl practices last year. Just that suddenness, that quickness. Are there some different ideas that Fury will bring to the table? And maybe that play is already in your playbook. Maybe that concept is already in your playbook, but you can maybe take what the focus is on a given game plan, a given week, and just shift it over a little bit. Then to me, Chris, I want to see, can you break some tendencies? Can you come out and let's say the scout on you as a team is that in this situation, 68% of the time this year, you've ran the ball up the middle, or in this situation, you've gone to this guy. Throw all that out the window. Throw more on first down, throw on second and long. I think there's an old school like NFL thought. It seems like if you have a second and long, it seems like Shula wanted to run the football and try to cut down the distance on the third and long. Well, if opponents know you're doing that, you're just going to end up in third and long anyway. So, I think there's some different tendency breaking things you can do here if you're Fury. And maybe, Chris, maybe you get a little extra excitement from the guys. I don't know. Like Shula actually was very liked in the building, I think, as a person, but it's got to get a little bit just frustrating when you're working your tail off, you're going back out there, and it's just not working. You're just not getting the results you want. So will this be a situation where having somebody that's got some energy, got some passion at that spot, will it spark things on offense for the next three games?
Yeah, and I think, if you listen to Shane Beamer or saw his comments from the SEC coaches teleconference on Wednesday when he kind of officially announced, hey, Mike is calling the plays on game days going forward this season, he talked about that collaborative effort. And so I'm interested to see, what does Sean Elliott bring more to the table? As we pointed out already, you look out there in the Ole Miss game and you can see some run plays where you're like, that's a Sean Elliott run scheme play, tight end insert play, one of his classic plays that he kind of helped get installed when he got to South Carolina. But you think about Sean Elliott's experience offensively, when he was at Georgia State, Wes, we don't even, not even to go back to the time at South Carolina when he was the run game coordinator and had involvement in the offense with Steve Spurrier at times, at Georgia State, had success with mobile quarterbacks like Lenoris Sellers, had success running the football. That was an area where they really turned around. It took a little bit, but they got there. They started running the football quite well. And most years he was there, they were in the top 25 nationally rushing. And so I think it's an interesting dynamic. You've got Furry, right, who ran this Mike Martz type of NFL system, but that's what they did at Limestone. And they did a good job with it because he's the winningest coach at Limestone. Like, they did some things offensively. He's also the receivers coach. Not that Mike Furry dislikes running the football, of course, but you've got that dynamic with him being a receivers coach, him, I'm sure, wanting to feed his guys from a play calling standpoint, but then knowing that you got to run the football and you've got a quarterback who's really, really good at it, and you've got Sean Elliott helping you put together the game plan, who's a guy who is certainly well-versed in the run game and also with mobile quarterbacks. So, yeah, Furry's calling it on game day, but I think there's going to be a good bit of Sean Elliott influence during the week and even on game day going forward. So I'm like you. I'm curious, what can you tweak? You obviously can't turn over the playbook, even with the benefit of a bye week. But can this staff identify some areas that South Carolina needs to lean into? Some things that they just frankly need to say, you know what, we don't do that very well. Let's stop trying to do it. I think there's several things that they can do going forward. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it will be for sure. All right, dude, let's dive into it. Big picture, Beamer's got a big hire to make, obviously. The biggest hire of his, I would say, head coaching career to this point. And, frankly, there aren't really any, like, official names yet where we can definitively say, hey, this is someone we know for a fact Beamer is going to talk to. There's a connection here. He's going to talk to him, somebody to watch. We just, especially with it being the kind of timing of this, man, just can't, like, I don't want for this podcast or our website to ever be one where we just throw out a name and we, like, pretend it's a sourced name, but it's really not. So we're not going to do that. But what we are going to do is just go ahead and give the disclaimer off top. Like, if we're talking about names right now, we're just talking about, hey, this would make sense. It would make sense for Beamer to look at this guy. And I'll be very curious to see what the just overall approach is from Beamer in terms of what he is looking for this time around. Because I do think, and people will think this sounds crazy, we've talked about this a little bit before, just purely, can you score the most points? Yes, that is the object of the game. However, it's actually not. The object of the game is to win the game. And if you have one offense that scores 35 points but consistently puts the defense in a disadvantage, so the defense then gives up 38, was that a successful offense compared to an offense that scored 28 points, but was very complimentary to its defense and its special teams to fill position, didn't put them in bad spots, was efficient, and your defense allowed 21 points. So on paper, 35 is obviously better than 28, but football is just so much more, I would say, there's so much more depth to the game than just that. And I think we've seen at times, we've seen offenses at South Carolina. I always think of the first year of Brian McClendon where they completely changed their overall approach and said, we're going hurry up, no huddle, RPO, score. And that offense scored a lot of points, but then they also didn't really seem to win a bunch more games and also didn't really seem to be able to close out games at times. So I do think when Beamer has made these hires before, and obviously 2 out of the 3 have not really worked out at OC. When he's made these hires, I do believe he's tried to have some depth to the decision in that we do want to play defense. We want to be great on special teams. There does need to be a complementary football aspect. Now, I'll be curious to see, does he get away from just this kind of pro-style tag that has been involved with these 3 hires? And can you put together, or can you find a coach to put together an offense that is a little bit more dynamic, a lot more efficient, can be exciting, but still provides balance, still provides like a complementary aspect to your entire football team. And we've seen other teams in this conference, I feel like, do just that with college-y, I will call it, offenses that aren't necessarily like pro style.
Yeah, and the pro style thing, you kind of have to try to do a good job of defining what exactly that is when you're talking about it, because one of the names, and I know we'll maybe get into some names, Wes, so First of all, I don't know if Cade Bell from Pittsburgh is going to be involved in the coaching search at all. At this point, I don't have a clue. But he's young. He's done really well where he's been at, including at Pitt for 2 years. And some Gamecock fans have been bringing him up for a while. You know how this works. A lot of fans, hey, Cade Bell, he's doing really well. He seems to fit the mold. His system is certainly a college-y system and has had a lot of success at the college level, whether it's FCS, Western Carolina, or now at Pitt in the ACC. Internally, they refer to that as a pro-style system. So when you hear that, pro-style, oh my gosh, stay away from, right? But it's kind of exactly, for fans, it's kind of what you're looking for, right? They're explosive, they can run the football, they pass the football, they score a lot of points, right? And so I think let's back up. You're exactly right that Shane, like, I don't really know. Maybe he goes this direction. It doesn't seem like Shane Beamer, who has spent time at Oklahoma in the Big 12. He saw a lot of offenses that go up and down the field. I don't think he really wants to be that. And if, like, I hope people get what you were trying to say, Wes, and that, like, there is sometimes a trade-off in that. If you want to be a team that's a little more balanced and able to play, if you want, ball control and able to run the football, that is a perfectly valid way to go about it. The problem is, even though they've wanted that to be the identity at South Carolina, they haven't been able to do it except for 1 year, which was last season, because you were in the top 40 nationally rushing because of Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders, and you had a really good defense, best defense you've had since you've been here. The other years, you gave up too many negative plays, too many sacks, and you weren't able to run the football well enough. That diminishes your ability to play complementary football and actually have that identity that you want, right? So, you know, Shane Beamer talked about this when he was talking about making the decision to move on from Shula. He doesn't just tie it to this year. Yes, he recognizes this year has not been near good enough, but he went back. We've talked about this before. He went back and said, hey, it hasn't been good enough. Really, there's been some trends, some negative trends over the last several years. So, and that spans more than one offensive coordinator. So what are those things? So is he thinking, I think this is a question we got to get answered, Wes. I don't know the answer. Philosophically, is his mind going somewhere else about how he wants to structure the offense and the team? Maybe so.
What does pro style mean to you? I have some ideas. So I think first of all, the whole pro style thing gets confirmed a little bit in people's minds because Dow Loggins, yes, you plucked him from Arkansas, but the guy was a NFL offensive coordinator at multiple stops, like throughout most of his coaching career. Now Satterfield comes in from the NFL, but really was not like an NFL lifer like a Dow Loggins was. You look at Mike Shula, he obviously has spent time at the college level. He has spent time at the NFL level, but at least part of what he's known for is he was quarterbacks coach and then offense coordinator with the Panthers. Most recently, he was at the Bills and kind of like an off-the-field role, but again with the NFL. So, but here's what when I think of pro style, I think, first of all, there's going to be some level of complexity to your passing game. And, you know, I think that can go two ways. Like, you don't want to, if I'm Beamer and I'm making this hire, I don't want to go too far in the other direction, right? To where you go so like collegey that you don't really want to get that label that like a Tennessee and Heupel and those guys get about their passing game. I mean, there's discussion every year about their wide receivers and the route tree that they run and the concepts they run and just how simplified it is, basically, because it is purely a super spread, I call it. Like, you're not just spread, like you're spreading as far as you possibly can legally, and then you're trying to run the football, and then you have simplistic routes a lot of times on the outside. you're almost 100% shotgun as well. They've implemented, I haven't watched a ton of Tennessee this year, to be honest. I feel like they've implemented a little bit more under center, a little bit more. We're going to jumbo up and put a couple of tight ends out there on some situational stuff. So they are even trying to be a little bit more multiple. So, but that's one thing, a little bit of complexity to varying degrees to your passing game. 2, do you huddle or not? I feel like pro style, that's kind of one of those check marks. Like most offenses I would call pro style are probably going to check just about all of these boxes. You have a little bit more of a deliberate pace. Can you go tempo at times? Can you go up tempo at times, I should say? Yes, you can, but you're a little bit more focused on that deliberate mindset. Are you under center at times? And for South Carolina, I think, like most teams, they still are in shotgun more than they're under center, but they are going to be under center. You look back at Satterfield, he was certainly under center quite a bit. You see South Carolina being pistol a lot, which is kind of, I think, their version of being under center, because you still kind of, in theory, get the under center style play action passing, get the run game going downhill, in theory. So you have that. Are you at times condensed, where you're doing condensed formations as opposed to all spread? That's a lot of it. And are you introducing personnel and formation-wise a little bit more than just your typical 3 receiver, 1 tight end? Are you putting 2 tight ends on the field? Are you putting 3 tight ends on the field more than just 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 goal line? To me, I'm trying to think if there's anything else off the top of my head. That's what I'm, from a modern standpoint, think of when I hear pro style. You probably don't see quite as much of the triple option type stuff. You do probably have some orbit motion type stuff, depending on which system you're kind of getting into. Every system's a little bit different when you look at that. But that's what pro style, just a general sense, means to me. So I don't think Beamer should go away from all the things I just talked about by any means. But do you take the slider and slide it a little bit more towards college as opposed to being a little bit more over here, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think we brought this up earlier this week, but Marcus Satterfield, who had, by all accounts, the most complex giant playbook at South Carolina, had only spent 1 year in the NFL, not even as a play caller. Dow Loggins, who had spent, I don't know if he spent more time in the NFL than Mike Shula, but certainly like they're comparable. Not that his playbook was paper thin, but like I think some things were simplified last year and did look at times more collegey. And then you remember, 2022 with Satterfield, the explosion at the end of the year. South Carolina simplified some things, right? So I think, pro style can mean different things to different people, even to coaches, right? You could probably get coaches arguing on that's a pro style offense. It's more college, because there's so much carryover nowadays. But I do think what you mentioned, Wes, in terms of the complexity is part of it. The complexity of the playbook, the route trees, the calls, how you're huddling, how you're administering the offense. Obviously, when you get into pros and these guys, it's their full-time job. They spend plenty of time at the college level, but literally all they do is football. There's more time, to put in these things. We've all heard the jokes with, Peyton Manning or Drew Brees or some of these guys reciting some of their old NFL play calls. They're huge. They're wordy, and so those things are we've seen the Waffle House menus, right, from some of the NFL coaches and what they call off of. So, I mean, we're super generalizing it, but I think that's some of the things. And to go to a more collegey offense, are you simplifying things a little bit? I was looking up another name that I have no clue if he'll come up or not, but, Jake Spavital is a guy that you think of as like a collegey offense. And I was looking earlier today at, there's a concept in their offense just called Storm. And it's basically, hey, the receiver has been going up against this DB all game, and he's taking mental notes on how a guy is playing a certain route. If he's tagged as the Storm receiver, you just go freelance. You run down the field if you want, give him a stutter step, go. Quarterback knows who's tagged. He knows what he might do. They got to get on the same page, right? That's a little bit more collegey. You might say, well, they got option routes in the NFL. Yes, they do. A little bit different than that, right? But I think collegey offense, maybe quicker installation times, more no huddle, a lot of the air raid stuff, right, that you see is more college. So it can mean different things for different people, but I think it's gotten a bad rap here because of complexity, things like that. And I think that is what you mentioned, adjusting that slider. Can you go to something that is a little bit more player friendly, that is going to help them with some of the execution issues South Carolina's had?
Well, I think when you have so much roster turnover too, man, you almost have to do that. Like, there's only so much time in the week that these guys are allowed to get together, and you just don't necessarily have these guys have all been in a system for 3 years or something like that, where you can just kind of layer it and add more and more each year, because most of the guys who are playing have been a part of your program. You just don't have that anymore. So I think whatever you can do, like I talked to one of the other shows about, do you have a system? And what does that really mean? And is it a flexible system, but is a system nonetheless? And, there's something to be said that Josh Heupel and Tennessee and that offense, that, dude, they just keep plugging in quarterbacks and they keep having some level of success, right? Like, now they can't stop anybody this year, so they're struggling overall for a different reason, but they lost in a very high profile situation. They lost their big money. This was the dude. This was everybody was celebrating on VolQuest message boards. You got your quarterback. It was one of the first big money deals that was kind of, I would say, at least reported on publicly, in terms of he's getting all this money. And then what do you know? He just up and leaves. You go out, you go get a quarterback that was at App State last year, and you plug him in, and you're still having some level of success on offense. So I do think there's something to be said for systems that can give you an advantage. So if I'm Beamer, I'm not saying you have to get completely away from the pro style thing, but I do think you want an offense that is fairly easy to learn. You want an offense that, is fun, is exciting, is creative, is sort of gets guys excited to play in it, if that makes sense. And, I think you want an offense that at its core is efficient. And you're always kind of talking about, speaking of sliders, like, is it possible to be efficient and explosive? Or are those two things kind of at odds with each other? And so I do think it's possible to be both. Is it possible to be like elite in both? I think that's kind of hard to do. But in today's era, where we have shortened games, man. The games are shorter than ever. The teams that scare the crap out of you without having elite talent. Now, they have good talent, but without having elite talent, those teams, to me, yes, Tennessee, one of them, Vanderbilt, Missouri. I mean, Alabama, obviously, they're always going to have really, really good talent. But, dude, for a pass-first offense, that's as efficient of an offense as you're going to see in college football these days. And it is to the pro-style side of the slider.
Absolutely.
But they're very efficient, man. Like, they have a huge priority on efficiency. And one reason South Carolina was in position to win that game is they actually got Alabama out of that and forced some 3-and-outs, got them off the field. But for the most part, if you have what South Carolina wants to be, and that's a complementary football team where you can make an impact on special teams, you have good defenses, and then you have an offense that doesn't necessarily have to be the thing that goes out and wins every game for you, but can be solid and efficient. You can win a lot of games like that with the talent South Carolina has. But I think if you can shorten some games the way those teams do, you put a little bit more pressure on the teams that are maybe going to be a little bit more talented than you in most cases.
Yeah. How can you find an advantage? I mean, you would love, Wes, for South Carolina to end up being, a team that you look at and go, that's one of the most talented teams in the country. Like, yes, that is a goal too, right? Ultimately, the teams that are the best, like, they tend to just have the best talent. Um, Schemes can fail you, so can players. But like, if you can pick one, who are you going to pick? You're going to pick the team that just has dudes, because then offensively they can block you, run the football, win one-on-one balls, have a quarterback with a lot of talent that can make plays. Defensively, they're going to hit you, tackle, cover, rush, right? And that comes down to dudes. But finding a schematic advantage, especially at this stage in the program development for South Carolina, is something you want. And so that's why there's so much talk about a system, right? Going out and finding a guy who has a system that's proven, like a recent proven system that's had proven success, that has an identity that you can go, what does this coach do? And you can say, his offenses typically really do this well. It might be one thing, two things, three things. Of course, you want them to be able to score points. That's the ultimate goal. But you have to have, I think, some type of identity. And for a lot of, these years since 2021, there's been kind of that identity crisis, right? And what South Carolina is offensively, maybe even versus what they want to be.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Hey, let's talk about a couple of great sponsors, Chris. And man, from what I understand, you randomly had a conversation about our guys over at Brunt. Did you hear that hit the table, man? Like that is a
Solid.
That's a solid heavy duty boot right there. But also, man, super just comfortable on the inside as well. You don't have that just long break-in period. But as you were getting your heat looked at, right?
Yep.
You had a conversation. You saw the Brunts in the wild, basically.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Brunts in the wild. Yeah, our tech from our guys over at Krantz Cooling and Heating, shout out to them, looked out. Oh, you got on some Brunt work boots. How you like those? He's like, love them. Wear them every day. Super durable. We're talking about how comfortable they are, because normally work boots, like, you're kind of leaning into durability, right? But these are durable and comfortable. They're different than the ones you just showed, Wes. They're different than the ones I have. They got a bunch of different kinds, obviously, but everybody I've talked to is loving Brunt stuff. I certainly do. I've been wearing them around when I'm working on stuff around the house or outside, some projects that we got going on. They are amazing. And so I hope you'll check them out.
Yeah, and if you're on the video podcast version of the show, you see it popping up right there, man. Still got a special code for you if you want to check them out yourself. Use that code GC. You're going to get $10 off your first purchase from Brunt. I'm going to throw this right here in the chat as well, so you'll have easy access to that code. But again, the code GC at checkout gets you $10 off if you want to try your own Brunt workwear, boots, and other things on there as well. So just go check out that website. Promise you, you'll find something that you love from our friends at Brunt.
Going to tell them about Palmetto Golf and Belts too, Wes. PalmettoGolfing.com. That's where you can go. Our friend Brandon Cohn, online shop, custom golf towels, gloves, tees, and amazing needlepoint belts that are just as well made or better than a lot of the ones you're going to find online or at retailers, but at a more affordable price. Yeah, and Palmetto Golf and Belts. Lots of great products for that golfer in your life. If you're a golfer, got to check it out. If you're looking for, now that it's November 6th, maybe a Christmas idea for that golfer in your life. Again, custom golf towels, belts, tees, and gloves. The Palmetto tree design, the South Carolina garnet, the South Carolina blue, the cross design. They've all been super popular with our members on the Insiders Forum. They've gotten rave reviews so far, and he's always running some great specials that you can go check out. Run on over to PalmettoGolfing.com. Palmetto Golf and Belts, Brandon Cohn you can know he's a big Gamecock Central supporter, obviously a longtime Gamecock fan as well. Go support him. Go check out palmettogolfing.com.
Shout out to all those awesome sponsors. Chris, let's close this thing out with a little bit of talk on some specific guys. You mentioned Cade Bell earlier. For those who missed it, anybody we talk about on today's show, we're just talking about guys that make sense. We're not like talking about, hey, this means they're definitely involved or not. What makes sense? We're kind of looking for guys who have been productive, guys who have certainly called plays, but also maybe you're at a place where it would make sense for them to leave to go to South Carolina. We're going to try to avoid the, some of the takes you see online about guys who might go to your particular school when there's no shot whatsoever. So Cade Bell, he is at Pitt, which obviously is a Power 4 job. Maybe it's tough to get him out from somewhere like that. But, Chris, at the same time, this is someone who pretty much their entire life has kind of been a Southeast guy. His dad played for Spurrier at Florida and, from the Jacksonville area. Like, certainly I would think just the SEC name itself would carry some weight here. His dad's at Western Carolina right now, so family, I guess, aspect could be important. I don't know. We're not speaking for him, but if South Carolina were to pursue a Cade Bell at Pitt, what do you think the qualities are that stand out to you about him?
Yeah, I think checks a lot of boxes into what you could be looking for. I mean, first of all, young Wes, 32 years old, so kind of a fast riser, has a very interesting system. If we're talking about system and identity, his system merges his dad's system, which is a lot of actually like Spurrier stuff in terms of route concepts, merges that spread type of attack with some Joe Brady stuff that they were running, 2019 and onward. Joe Brady, obviously in the NFL now, still going, and kind of merge those two systems. And, I was talking to a college coach who was familiar with that system and said it's really kind of messed with defenses. It's hard to go against. It can be explosive. You look at what they've done, they've put up points, everywhere they've been. He got his start, like I said, under his dad, but he has had the keys to the offense, and now he's completely out on his own being at Pitt. His dad's still the head coach at Western Carolina, but he's improved offenses and done it pretty quickly, no matter where he's been. Western Carolina, his last year there was, first in the FCS and total offense. They were third in scoring offense. Look at what he's done at Pitt. They've become a lot more explosive. They're averaging a bunch of points this year. They're in the top 10, I think, in scoring offense. So it's a system that has an identity and, is pretty tough. And I think he also brings some energy and juice from what I've seen and heard as a recruiter, Wes. So an interesting name. Again, another disclaimer, don't know if he'll be involved or not one way or another, but just kind of seems to fit that bill of some of the things you might be looking for.
All right, let's talk about a couple other guys, Chris. What do you think about the idea of Gus Malzahn? Because obviously that's a system, right? Like that is a I would say that's a fairly, like, how do you put it? It's like a hardwired system. Like, it's not, I'm sure every coach has some fluidity to what they want to do, but you kind of know what you're getting when you go get Gus Malzahn, and you're wanting him to bring in that system. I don't know necessarily if that's the long-term move, like that's the long-term fit. Now, if you're talking about the thought of a season or two, and you're talking about the thought of if you have Sellers for another year, and you have this system with him, I mean, it would make a lot of sense for Beamer to at least have that conversation, I think. And QB run, we know what he did with Cam Newton. We know what he can do with a running quarterback. And, I think just in terms of would he come to South Carolina, this is a guy a lot of people, when it was not working out for Shula, were going, why didn't you call Gus Malzahn last year and see if he was interested? And coaching Lenore Sellers. Well, Florida State had already hired him when Dow Loggins basically said, I'm out. I'm going to App State. So In that case, I think it would possibly work out a little bit better timing wise this year if Florida State, we don't know what they're going to do. We don't know if Norvell is going to be out. Shoot, Norvell is an offensive mind, man. That's a guy you could talk to himself. He ran the offense at Memphis before he became the head coach. So if you're in a situation where Florida State does open up, Malzahn is out there, that would be firmly into the category, depending on what Beamer prioritizes. If you want like a veteran, someone that's been there, someone that's been not just an OC, but has been a head coach at multiple spots, if you valued that in this hire, I think that's someone you at least talk to. I just think whether or not he would be someone Beamer would be interested in probably would be determined by what true scheme are you wanting to run, or are you flexible on the scheme and you're just more about let me get the best guy, the best play caller that I can go get.
Yeah, that's very true. And that might go back to that philosophically, like, are you saying, okay, maybe this doesn't exactly fit like the scheme I quote unquote like or prefer, or maybe it doesn't even match for my ideas of how I'd like to have my football team play. But then you might go, that guy, not necessarily Gus, anybody, that guy's actually the best guy. And so maybe I can mold this a little bit more to who he is and what he wants to be offensively. That might be, Wes, some guys out there, you do have to look at it. You got to realize this is going to be a crowded coaching market because it's a crowded head coaching market. So by default, it's a crowded OC coaching market already. It's probably going to get more crowded. There are some guys who already have good jobs. Like, to be honest, are you going to go pluck, and I'm just making, like, you're not going and plucking Brian Hartline from Ohio State to be your OC at South Carolina, right? Not like guys like that who either A, have a great job, B, their next step is being a head coach. Now, Gus did the opposite. He was a sitting head coach. Actually had a rough year the year when he hung it up at UCF. But he was like, you know what? I just want to go call ball plays. I want to go call plays. We have seen some head coaches do that, whether it's smaller school coaches. Kane Womack, right? South Alabama, head coach, doing fine. I just want to go call defense at Alabama. Or Chip Kelly, UCLA, there were some frustrations built in there. He says, hey, I just want to go call ball plays. Gus kind of did the same. Not to say he'll never go be a head coach again, but we are in this NIL era. It's kind of turned some coaches off. Maybe he's a guy that just wants to call plays. And so whether it's him or just somebody that fits that mold who's not looking to, okay, my next career rung step is head coach somewhere, maybe you can find a guy like that is my point.
Yeah, and I do wonder how much, because we know how important this hire is, how much will Beamer value experience? Like, how much is it going to be? Are you willing to risk this hire on going with a guy who is super young, or are you going to put a huge value on this guy's been there, they've seen it all, they've done it all? And, the funny thing about some of this stuff is most teams look at Malzahn, even with Florida State losing this year quite a bit, their offense most games has not been the issue. But even then, you can go on the message boards, you can look on Twitter, you can find FSU fans complaining about play calling on particular plays. So nobody is ever completely happy with their offensive coordinator. There are going to be pros and cons to any guy you bring in. There are certainly some cons to the Malzahn system. However, this thing does work. When you have the right guys in it, it absolutely works and would certainly give you maybe not necessarily the balance in that you have a complex passing game, but give you the balance in terms of you're able to run the football, take a little bit of that pressure off your defense, and go put that game pressure on your opponent. So does Beamer want to go heavy into that direction? I tell you, man, a guy that has kind of grabbed my attention that I've been reading up on a little bit, that to me would split the difference a little bit between young, creative, still young, but at this point in his career, because he got started so early, is has a ton of experience, including in the SEC, would be if Baylor opens up, Jake Spavital, who is the former A&M offensive coordinator as a very young coach, he is the OC now at Baylor, has done well there. And, it's kind of in definitely a college-y style scheme, but has just called plays over and over and over again, multiple places. Has the Baylor offense running pretty well this year, and would be someone that has been through the SEC battles.
Yeah, interesting. Brought him up earlier talking about one of his concepts. Yeah, that's kind of threading the needle in that younger versus older, but Wes much more right. Like I haven't watched a lot of Baylor football this year, to be honest with you. But from what you remember from Spavital, it was more of that no huddle, like more of that collegey type offense, right? But certainly, he's now got some head coaching experience. Didn't work out where he was. I believe that was at Texas State, but has done some good things throughout his career. He's had some good offenses that he's overseen. So, it would be different, obviously, in a hypothetical world, would be a good bit different, I think, than some of the guys that have rolled through South Carolina in the past. And if you're saying, well, that's a good thing, that's what they need, fair point. But, philosophically, schematically, I think a good bit different than what Shane Beamer's been accustomed to. But nonetheless, I think an interesting guy, interesting thought.
Yeah, and there you can go through these lists, man. There's all kinds of just interesting coaches that would make sense for South Carolina. Lots of guys that have have success, where they are currently at. It's just a matter of, are they going to be a fit for you? Can you get it going quickly? I'll tell you what, man, at least program that South Carolina fans are pretty familiar with, Old Dominion, their OC, Kevin Decker, who, we got to look at. He is someone who, especially this year, I've been going through like the different metrics like success rate, explosiveness, points per opportunity, which go a little bit beyond kind of your just traditional total offense, points per game, stuff like that. Kevin Decker at ODU, someone that, will spread you out, definitely a college-y style offense, and has had a ton of success this year with those guys, not necessarily in terms of the team itself, the record, but just in terms of offensive success. Again, I don't know if Beamer will, but I've been putting a high priority in the guys I've looked at. Do you have an efficient offense? Are you able to stay on the field? Are you able to convert third downs? And Kevin Decker, another one that I think if you're Beamer, you maybe at least look into a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys, maybe not a lot. There's certainly several at those lower levels that maybe they haven't been a play caller for, 20 years. But they are, more of that up and comer who's done some really good things. And so that's what you kind of have to think about. This is such an important hire, Wes. And you could pick a guy who's been around a long time, who's had success at a place or several places, plug him in, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't work. Now, you may say, I'll take my chances with that. I tend to agree. But also, can you find someone that maybe they don't have as lengthy of a track record? Maybe they've been calling plays for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, and maybe haven't done it at like the SEC level. Because again, the odds of you plucking, unless it's a situation where there's been a coaching change and things are in flux, in most situations, you're not just plucking a sitting SEC or Big Ten offensive coordinator from another school. If things are stable, if they're happy, if they're doing well, if they're well paid. No, obviously, no disrespect to South Carolina, but it's just more of a lateral move for a lot of those guys. So what do you do next if you don't have those? What you find a veteran who's somewhere doing something. You find, an up and coming type coach, and that's sure a risk, but they're all a risk. Every hire is a risk, and this one's bigger than others because of the circumstances surrounding it.
Yeah, and I think, man, we didn't go into this when we're talking about qualities for the new coordinator that I think is worth mentioning. It needs to be a scheme. It needs to be a coach that is quarterback friendly. That's something that every coach talks about a lot of times. The scheme is QB friendly. It needs to actually be. It needs to be QB friendly. It needs to be O-line friendly. It needs to have built in the ability to keep your offense from being constantly put in a situation where there's an onus on your offensive line to be perfect, basically. And we all know, like, there's only so much scheming you can do if you're not very good up front. But I mean, we've seen it, man. There's a huge difference between a scheme that is friendly to your offensive linemen and gives them that little slight advantage versus one that is not. I mean, I think in addition to being all those things, is there a scheme that inherently maybe kind of limits your negative plays? Is there a scheme that inherently limits your tackles for loss allowed, your sacks, your stuff like that, where it's just built around that idea? And obviously, down to down, game to game, there's going to be situations where if a team's getting you in third and longs, all that's going to go out the window. But at least just over time, from a trend standpoint, like, for example, I'm just going to take Gus just randomly, but you want to talk about staying on schedule? Like, now those guys are not going to be some high-powered passing game under Gus. You're just not. So if you're Beamer, do you factor that in? Because how do you go recruit superstar wide receivers if they realize, well, you're not going to throw the ball around? From a percentage standpoint, Gus is going to run the ball more than he throws it. Now, if you want to talk about having successful offense, this website I'm on right now, fourthandshort.com, it lets you sort truly by coordinator, Chris, and just in terms of success rate for his offenses over the years. And we're talking about from 2009 with very little, let's see, no seasons off, actually. 2009 to 2025, just in success rate metric, which basically means, are you staying on schedule? You're not having a bunch of negative plays. You're staying on schedule down to down. Chris, green is good, red is bad on this thing. So if you're in the top, I don't know how this thing is factored, but if you're in the top certain percentage in the country for this stat, it's labeled green. From 2009 to 2025, Gus Malzahn has one red box. He has one sort of white neutral box, and then every other box is green, meaning he was in the top whatever percentile in the country in success rate every single one of those other seasons that he was running the offense across multiple conferences, multiple quarterbacks, multiple teams, multiple everything. So, I'm not saying Gus has to be the higher, but somebody who inherently can kind of keep you on schedule and take, like, we've seen the O-line overall and those tackles for losses, those negative plays, we've seen them be an issue throughout multiple coordinators, throughout multiple head coaches, throughout multiple administrations at the school. Like, it's kind of been a theme as long as we've been following the thing.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre almost, right? No matter the coach, the coordinator, the position coach, like, it's just been a thing, and it hasn't always been a situation where you look at it and go, well, they've never had talent on the O-line. Like, you get the sense that they actually have at times. Not that it's always been horrible either, right? They fielded some offensive lines that have been adequate over time. They haven't all been terrible. So I think, to go back to the Gus example, and not necessarily him, again, the disclaimer, but I think the theme is track record of recent success. Like, that's something where, like, you could look back at the hires, especially with hindsight. Well, you don't even need hindsight. You can go, all right, which college offenses have these guys coordinated recently that have been successful? And you're going, you got to look back a while, if you're to find those things, if at all. And so I think that's more along the lines, ideally, of what we're going to see. I get the sense that that's more of a priority this time, Wes. Now, you may say, well, it should have been a priority in the past. Water under the bridge, that's over. I think what they're going to be looking for is someone who's had more success recently at the college level for this hire.
All right, guys, we're going to get out of here momentarily. One other guy I think worth mentioning, because there are just some heavy connections here, would be Brad Glenn at Cincinnati. It's a name that's been mentioned, even reported on a little bit, just as somebody to watch. And same deal, success rate. Most years he's been a coordinator. That's been a good number for him. He was at Georgia State as Sean Elliott's offensive coordinator for 3 years. He's now been at Cincinnati. This is his third year there. They actually are really good offensively this year, is Cincinnati under Brad Glenn. This will be a little bit more, actually kind of similar, at least in terms of overall philosophy and approach, to what Malzahn's doing in terms of run the football, run the football, run the football. You could see why Sean Elliott targeted him as his OC when he was the head coach at Georgia State. Most of those years, Elliott and Glenn were in the top 25 in the country in rushing offense. And this would be a fit just in terms of you talking about somebody who's familiar with the state of South Carolina, somebody who I believe went to Clemson and just has longstanding ties to the Palmetto State. I would imagine someone that Beamer at least asks around on, sniffs around on, and maybe even talks with.
Yeah, I mean, the ties there are, obviously there with him being a state of South Carolina guy and Elliott guy. He's had some success, working with Scott Satterfield over at Cincinnati. He's been part of some good offenses, been at some other places too. So, stylistically, I think different, but has had success with guys he's worked at, whether it's Elliott, Brendan Sorsby at Cincinnati, their quarterback, kind of taking the country by storm with some of the things that they've done there. So learned under some good ones, has some experience, has some track record, and obviously has the ties. So probably another one that at least keep in mind. Again, we don't know, is he involved? Is he kind of involved? Will he not be involved? Don't really know at this early stage, but certainly someone that makes sense.
All right, y'all. So we're going to get out of here. Appreciate y'all hopping on during this bye-week episode of the show. We'll be back next week to dive into, of course, South Carolina versus Texas A&M and whatever else we're hearing. If we start getting information on guys who may be in the mix for this job, we will certainly pass that along. And first, we'll be passing it along on Gamecock Central. So y'all come check us out on there with the Insiders Forum and everything we've got going on there, getting you, I guess, through this final quarter of the season and then diving into what will be an important, very important offseason for South Carolina football. He is Chris. I'm Wes. Shout out to everybody who hopped on, and shout out to all of our great sponsors here on the show. Y'all have a good one. Y'all have a great weekend.